So South Africa's got a diplomatic standoff, a political scandal, and one of the biggest education shakeups in years. And it's all unfolding in the same week. So my friends, hit like and subscribe, and let's get into it. So Donald Trump wants South Africa barred from the 2026 G20 summit in Miami. But the real story is what happens next, not the announcement itself. You see, the G20 runs on consensus, and multiple members, including Germany and Japan, have already signaled their pushback, warning that excluding a founding member would undermine the entire purpose of the group. And so their message is if a single country can unilaterally shrink the G20, the platform loses its credibility as a space for cooperation rather than political punishment. Now, South Africa's stance is straightforward. It doesn't need an invitation. It's a founding member of the G20, and its seat exists because the other members approved it, not because the US grants it access. The presidency dismissed Trump's accusations of killing white people and human rights abuses as baseless, saying that the claims reflect political hostility and misinformation rather than any formal G20 process. Now, in saying that, the only mechanism that Trump seems to actually control here is visas, meaning that he could physically block South African officials from entering the US. Now, that wouldn't remove South Africa from the G20, but it would turn next year's summit into an empty chair spectacle and further deepen a relationship already in freefall. Now, diplomats say that the real risk here isn't South Africa being excluded, it's the G20 being dragged through another geopolitical tug of war that just weakens the entire bloc. Jacob Zuma's daughter has resigned as a member of parliament, and it comes amid one of the wildest stories that South Africa has heard all year. In case you missed it, a group of South African men who believed that they were traveling to Russia for MK Party-linked bodyguard training have instead found themselves caught up in the Russia-Ukraine war. Families told News 24 that the men sent private messages saying that the promised training quickly turned into something else: uniforms, drills, and orders from Russian commanders. Within days, they were moved towards active combat zones and told to follow instructions under contracts that were entirely written in Russian. Relatives now believe that they were recruited under false pretenses, allegedly by Zuma's daughter and two other associates who used MK Party branding throughout the entire process. Now, Zuma's son Budla and the MK Party reject all of this. In her sworn affidavit cited by Business Day, she says that she was misled by another individual and believed that the training was lawful and non-combat. The party says that her resignation was voluntary and not an admission of guilt. Meanwhile, though, the Hawks have confirmed that they're investigating into possible human trafficking, fraud, and illegal foreign military recruitment, while the presidency says that diplomatic efforts are now underway to try and bring the men home. So back in August, we told you about one of the boldest proposals in South African education, a 7.2 billion rand plan by the Jannie Mouton Foundation to buy out Curro and convert the country's largest private school group into a non-profit, pitched at the time as possibly the biggest philanthropic donation in our history. And look, the shareholders didn't hesitate. By the end of October, 99.98% of them voted in favor, clearing the internal hurdles and leaving only the regulators to decide what happens next. And just this past week, that decision has moved a step closer. The Competition Commission has officially recommended that the tribunal approve the deal, saying that it won't harm competition and will actually make a substantial positive contribution to education, with only a few final undertakings set to be agreed. But anyways, the real story is what this unlocks. Turning Curro into a non-profit means that every rand of surplus goes back into schools, facilities, and bursaries, a shift that its CEO says could fast-track expansion by decades, especially into underserved communities. Because just as Jannie Mouton put it, the goal is simple. If you can give learners access to good teachings, you can change their lives, and South Africa with it. And before we cruise on to our Bagel Bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, Ramaphosa has extended the Mandlanga Commission's deadline to probe Lieutenant General Umkonazi's claims of corruption within South Africa's security agencies. Now, the inquiry, as you know, is examining alleged interference and misconduct involving SAPS, the NPA, and state security, with hearings now running into 2026. Cell C has officially listed on the JSE after a turbulent turnaround period and years of restructuring under Blue Label. Now, this move marks a major step in stabilizing the mobile operator and simplifying its capital structure for public markets. And Eskom has posted a 24.3 billion rand half-year profit, signaling continued operational recovery. But in saying that, the utility warns that sustainability risks remain high due to municipal arrears exceeding 100 billion rand, weak tariffs, and the still critical need for government debt relief support. And on to our Bagel Bite of the day. This one's for the bookworms. Let's see what you got. The question is, which author wrote the book The Old Man and the Sea? Is it A, Ernest Hemingway, B, Charles Dickens, or C, F. Scott Fitzgerald? We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. And on to our Wildcard section. We rarely think about the sun as anything more than daylight until it fires off solar flares. You see, these eruptions can also coincide with clouds of charged particles being launched towards Earth. And when they reach our atmosphere, they distort magnetic fields and disrupt systems that keep modern life running. We're talking satellites, GPS timing, radio signals, even parts of the power grid. So we saw this last year when the strongest solar storm in more than 2 decades hit half the planet. Aviation networks reported radio blackouts, GPS accuracy dipped, and some satellites even entered safe mode. And so if a major solar flare ever hits South Africa directly, the earliest signs wouldn't show up in your home. They'd appear in the systems that our days quietly rely on. We're talking aviation routing, banking networks, mobile towers, and the satellites that hold it all together. And so that's why the South African National Space Agency operates a national space weather service that continuously monitors solar activity, including solar flares, tracking their potential impacts, and issuing alerts when disturbances are on the way. It's our closest form of an early warning sign for an event that doesn't arrive with the clouds, but with a burst of energy traveling millions of kilometers straight at us. And as for that Bagel Bite, the answer is Ernest Hemingway, the author of The Old Man and the Sea, one of the most influential short novels of the past century. Now, on the surface, it's a story about an old fisherman and his final great struggle. But the beauty of it actually sits in everything underneath. It's a story about endurance and dignity and what it means to keep fighting when the world thinks that you're done. And my friends, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Wishing you all a great week ahead. May you take it on with endurance and dignity, and may you keep fighting, even if the world thinks that you're done. Catch you guys all tomorrow for the next round of the good stuff. God bless.